The plasma cannon that Jake Morrison had been nursing for the past 6 hours finally gave up with a sound like a dying whale having an existential crisis. He stared at the smoking wreckage of what had been Research Station Omega-7's primary defensive weapon, then at the approaching Void collective ships that were still very much interested in turning him and everything he cared about into component atoms. "Well," he said to nobody in particular, "this is suboptimal." "Suboptimal is an understatement," came a voice from behind him. Jake turned to find Lyra Vex emerging from the maintenance shaft she'd been crawling through for the better part of an hour, her silver hair streaked with coolant fluid, and her pointed ears twitching with what he'd learned to recognize as either amusement or homicidal intent. With Lyra, the distinction was often academic. "Please tell me you have good news about the secondary defensive grid," Jake said, though her expression suggested he was about to be disappointed. "I have news about the secondary defensive grid." Lyra wiped her hands on a maintenance rag that had seen better decades. "It's gone. Along with the tertiary grid, the emergency backup systems, and what I think used to be the coffee synthesizer in Section 7. They destroyed the coffee synthesizer, now it's personal. Actually, that was me. I needed the quantum resonance coils for something more important than caffeine distribution." Jake gestured at the tactical display, which showed 17 enemy ships approaching in a formation that military textbooks described as absolutely overwhelming. "Please tell me you turned it into some kind of miracle weapon." "Better, I turned it into a miracle defense system." Lyra led him through the station's central corridor, stepping over debris and the occasional sparking piece of equipment. Though miracle might be overstating things. Desperate improvisation using principles that probably violate several laws of physics would be more accurate. Those are my favorite kind of plans. They reached the station's central hub, where Jake discovered that Lyra had been busy during their brief separation. What had once been the facility's main research lab now resembled the aftermath of a collision between a scrapyard and a university physics department. Cables snaked across the floor in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and the air hummed with the kind of energy that made his teeth itch. "Explain this to me like I'm a career soldier who knows how to shoot things but gets confused by technology more complex than a microwave," Jake said. "You know how the station's main computer controls everything from life support to door locks?" "Unfortunately, yes. I've been trapped in the bathroom twice this week because of software updates. I've connected every functional system on the station to create a distributed defense network. The environmental controls, the waste recycling, the food synthesizers, even the cleaning droids. Everything is now part of our defensive grid." Jake stared at her. "You turned the entire station into a weapon." "I turned the entire station into a really annoying obstacle. The collective ships are expecting military resistance. They're not expecting to be attacked by garbage disposals and maintenance robots." The station shuddered as the first wave of enemy fire struck the outer hull. Jake's tactical training kicked in automatically, analyzing structural stress patterns and calculating how long they could survive a sustained bombardment. The numbers weren't encouraging. "How long can we hold out?" he asked. "Against conventional military assault, maybe 20 minutes. Lyra was monitoring her improvised defense network on a display that showed the station's systems in a colorful web of connections. "But I'm counting on the collective not being prepared for unconventional defense." As if summoned by her words, the first breach alarm sounded. Jake watched through the security feeds as collective assault troops cut through the outer airlock with plasma torches, moving with the mechanical precision of soldiers who'd done this 1,000 times before. They made it exactly 3 steps before the cleaning droids attacked. "Are they being assaulted by vacuum cleaners?" Jake asked, watching trained killers flee from a squad of maintenance robots that Lyra had apparently reprogrammed for aggressive carpet cleaning. Modified with industrial cutting tools and territorial behavior protocols. Lyra's fingers danced over her control interface, orchestrating the station's bizarre defense. The food synthesizers in Section 3 are producing adhesive foam instead of protein bars. The atmospheric recycling system is now generating localized gravity wells, and the bathroom fixtures are. Well, let's just say the collective is discovering new definitions of biological warfare. Jake found himself grinning despite their dire circumstances. You've turned our research station into a cosmic practical joke. The best kind of defense is the kind your enemy doesn't see coming. More breach alarms. More security feeds showing collective troops encountering obstacles that defied their training and common sense. Jake watched a squad of elite soldiers retreat from a corridor where the artificial gravity had been reversed, leaving them walking on the ceiling, while automated sprinkler systems pelted them with industrial lubricant. This is either brilliant or completely insane, he observed. Why not both? The main assault came 3 hours later, when the collective finally adapted their tactics to account for weaponized household appliances. Jake and Lyra found themselves in the station's command center, surrounded by displays showing their improvised defenses being systematically dismantled by enemies who'd learned to shoot the cleaning robots first. "We're running out of tricks," Jake said, watching their defensive perimeter contract with each passing minute. "Not tricks, time." Lyra was working at a console Jake didn't recognize, her hands moving with the fluid precision of someone performing a complex piece of music. The delay tactics weren't meant to stop them permanently. They were meant to give me time to prepare the real defense. Which is, have you ever wondered what happens when you run a quantum resonance cascade through a research station's main computer core? Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the environmental systems. "Please tell me you're not planning to blow up the station." "I'm not planning to blow up the station. I'm planning to turn it into a multi-dimensional maze where the laws of physics become flexible." Before Jake could ask for clarification, the station's lights dimmed, and a sound like reality clearing its throat echoed through the corridors. Every display screen flickered, showing impossible geometries and equations that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. "Lyra, what did you do?" "I gave us home field advantage in a game where we get to write the rules." She stood up from the console, brushing dust off her hands with satisfaction. "The collective troops are now trying to navigate a space where up is a suggestion, distance is negotiable, and their weapons fire tends to loop back on itself." The security feeds confirmed her words. Jake watched trained soldiers stumble through corridors that folded in on themselves, their plasma rifles firing bolts that emerged from walls behind them, their tactical computers displaying error messages in languages that didn't exist. How long will it last? Long enough. The cascade effect is self-limiting. It'll burn out in about 6 hours, leaving us with a perfectly normal research station and a bunch of very confused invaders. Lyra settled into her chair with the weary satisfaction of someone who just successfully juggled flaming chainsaws while riding a unicycle. "Of course, we'll need to explain to our superiors why their top-secret research facility temporarily became a pocket dimension, but that's a problem for future us." Jake watched the tactical display as the collective ships, unable to navigate the spatial distortions around the station, began withdrawing to a safe distance. After 12 hours of impossible fighting, victory seemed to be settling around them like dust after an explosion. "We did it," he said, hardly believing the words. "We actually did it." "You sound surprised." "I am surprised. Military doctrine says we should have been obliterated in the first hour." Jake slumped into his own chair, feeling exhaustion seep into his bones. "Instead, we beat them with garbage disposals and theoretical physics. The best victories are the ones nobody sees coming." Jake let himself relax for the first time in what felt like years. The war was over, their mission complete. Soon he could submit his retirement papers and return to the simple life he'd been dreaming about: fishing, gardening, maybe learning to cook something more complex than military rations. Lyra was studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read, her silver eyes reflecting the command center's displays like mirrors of distant stars. "Jake," she said quietly. "Yeah. Very good." Her smile was small but somehow radiant. "Because I think our real work has only just begun." The words hit him like a plasma bolt to the chest, shattering his comfortable assumptions about endings and new beginnings. Jake stared at her, seeing something in her expression that suggested their impossible victory wasn't the conclusion of their story. It was barely the opening chapter. "Lyra, what are you talking about?" "Later. Right now, we should probably figure out how to explain to Command why their research station is currently existing in 7 dimensions simultaneously." Jake looked around at their transformed command center, where the displays were still showing readings that violated everything he thought he knew about reality, and realized that his retirement plans might need some significant revision. "I have a feeling," he said slowly, "that this is going to be a very long report." Jake Morrison had always prided himself on being unshockable. 23 years of military service had exposed him to alien biology, quantum weaponry, and the particular horror of trying to understand military logistics. But discovering that research station Omega-7's cafeteria served coffee that was apparently sentient crossed a line he hadn't known existed. "It's trying to communicate," he said, staring at the cup that was currently pulsing with different colors and making soft humming sounds. "The quantum cascade affected all the station's systems," Lyra explained, poking at her own breakfast with scientific curiosity. "The food synthesizers are experiencing what I'd call enhanced creativity. Yesterday, my protein bar tried to write poetry. Was it any good? Surprisingly profound, though it kept rhyming molecular structure with existential rupture." Jake set down his musical coffee and decided that some mornings required a different approach to consciousness. "Lyra, about what you said yesterday, our real work just beginning. I was hoping you could elaborate on that before I file my retirement papers." "About that?" Lyra pushed her plate aside. Her eggs had started arranging themselves into geometric patterns, and pulled out a data pad that definitely wasn't standard military issue. "I need to tell you something about why we were really stationed here. Please don't tell me we weren't actually researching improved crop yields." "We weren't actually researching improved crop yields." Jake sighed. "I should have known when the agricultural samples required Level 10 security clearance and hazmat protocols. The official cover was agriculture. The actual research involved something called Project Genesis, a joint effort between Earth Military Command and the Zarathi Science Directorate to study ancient artifacts discovered in the Veil Nebula." "Ancient artifacts, of course." Jake rubbed his temples where a headache was building with architectural ambition. "Let me guess, mysterious, powerful, and probably cursed." "Not cursed, just cosmically significant." Lyra activated her data pad, displaying images of objects that hurt to look at directly. "These artifacts appear to be technology from the architects, a species that existed before current galactic civilization developed." "Existed as in moved to a different neighborhood or became extinct." "Existed as in transcended physical reality, but left behind technology that can rewrite the fundamental laws of the universe." Jake stared at her. "And we thought it would be a good idea to study this technology. We thought it would be a worse idea to leave it lying around for someone else to find." Lyra closed the display, but the afterimages lingered in Jake's vision like cosmic retina burn. "The Void Collective's attack wasn't random, Jake. They were after the Genesis artifacts." "Which are stored where exactly?" "Sublevel 7. Behind the vault door marked, 'Dangerous vegetables do not open.' I walked past that sign every day for 6 months." "Good. That means the camouflage was working." Lyra stood up, her breakfast finally giving up its attempt at achieving sentience and returning to normal food behavior. "There's something else you need to know. I'm not just a Zarathi warrior assigned to your unit. I'm an agent of the Galactic Preservation Council. Jake felt another piece of his comfortable reality crumble. The what now? Think of us as cosmic librarians with military training. We monitor threats to galactic stability and take action when necessary. Lyra began walking toward the corridor, and Jake followed, partly from curiosity and partly because staying in the cafeteria meant dealing with his increasingly musical coffee. The Council has been tracking architect artifacts for centuries. When the Genesis cache was discovered, they needed someone with my training to assess the threat level. And you needed someone with my training because architect technology responds to human consciousness in unexpected ways. Your species has a unique approach to problem solving that the original architects never encountered, where they thought in terms of absolute logic and predetermined outcomes. Humans think in terms of improvisation and creative chaos. They reached the lift that led to the station's lower levels. Jake noticed that the control panel was displaying emotions instead of floor numbers. The quantum cascade is still affecting some systems, Lyra observed, pressing what appeared to be mild curiosity instead of the usual sublevel 7 button. So the Preservation Council paired us together as an experiment. Initially, yes, but the experiment exceeded all projections. The lift descended with what sounded like jazz music instead of the usual mechanical hums. Your tactical flexibility combined with my theoretical knowledge created a synergy that allowed us to defeat threats neither of us could handle alone. Like turning a research station into a multi-dimensional maze. Exactly. That shouldn't have been possible with conventional technology. But your human instinct for improvisation combined with my understanding of quantum mechanics created a solution that was both completely illogical and perfectly effective. The lift opened onto sublevel 7, revealing a corridor that looked like standard military architecture, except for the fact that some of the walls were slightly transparent and showed glimpses of other corridors that definitely shouldn't exist. The cascade effects are stronger down here, Lyra noted. The artifacts amplify quantum disturbances. They walked past doors marked with labels like hazardous turnips and experimental corn authorized personnel only, until they reached the vault marked dangerous vegetables do not open. Lyra placed her hand on what appeared to be a standard biometric scanner, but Jake noticed that the device was reading something more complex than fingerprints. Consciousness scan, she explained. The artifacts can only be handled by individuals with specific mental patterns. Too much logical thinking and they become inert. Too much chaos and they become unstable. And the perfect balance is found in teams, partnerships where different types of consciousness can complement each other. The vault door opened, revealing a chamber that existed in more dimensions than Jake's brain was comfortable processing. Jake, what I'm about to show you will change how you think about everything. My coffee is already singing show tunes and my breakfast tried to write poetry. I think I'm past the point of shock. The Genesis artifacts floated in containment fields that bent light into impossible angles. Jake counted 12 objects, each one challenging his understanding of what technology should look like. They weren't machines in any recognizable sense. They were more like crystallized thoughts, physical manifestations of concepts that had been made real through processes he couldn't begin to understand. These are tools for reshaping reality, Lyra said quietly. The architects used them to modify the fundamental forces of the universe: gravity, time, causality, all just variables to be adjusted according to need. And the Void Collective wanted these because they believed the universe would be more efficient if it followed strict logical principles. No chaos, no unpredictability, no room for the kind of improvisation that makes organic life possible. Jake studied the artifacts, noting how they seemed to respond to his attention by shifting colors and patterns. So our little victory yesterday wasn't the end of anything. It was a field test. The Council needed to know if our partnership could handle threats at this level. Lyra moved to a control console that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought conventional interfaces were insufficiently confusing. Because the Genesis cache is just one of many architect sites scattered across the galaxy, and the Void Collective isn't the only faction interested in acquiring this technology. How many other sites are we talking about? 47 confirmed, possibly more. Lyra's fingers danced over controls that existed in several dimensions simultaneously, each one containing technology that could remake civilization or destroy it entirely. Jake felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders like a suit of armor made from compressed anxiety. And the Council wants us to secure all of them. The Council wants us to do whatever is necessary to ensure the Architect's legacy is used to preserve galactic civilization, not replace it with. Jake looked around the vault, at technology that made his military training seem quaint, at artifacts that could reshape the fundamental nature of existence, and at the woman whose silver eyes held depths he was only beginning to understand. Does the job come with hazard pay? The job comes with the satisfaction of knowing you're helping preserve a universe where coffee can spontaneously develop musical ability and breakfast foods can discover poetry. In that case, Jake said, realizing that his fishing retirement had just become significantly more complicated, I guess I should cancel my pension application. Very good, Lyra smiled. Because our first official mission briefing starts in 10 minutes. The mission briefing took place in what had previously been the station's main conference room, and was now apparently a pocket dimension, where the laws of physics went to retire. Jake tried not to think too hard about the fact that his chair existed in 3 different locations simultaneously, or that the holographic display was showing their destination from angles that included yesterday and theoretical. Kepler X1, announced Commander Helena Cross via quantum transmission, her image flickering between dimensions with the persistence of someone who'd given up trying to understand the technical difficulties. Designation: impossible planet. Status: it shouldn't exist, but it does anyway. That's reassuring, Jake muttered, watching his coffee cup exist in a state of quantum superposition. The planet appears to be locked in a temporal anomaly, Cross continued, apparently unaware that her left hand was occasionally becoming transparent. Time flows in loops, gravity operates on a voluntary basis, and the weather includes phenomena that our meteorologists have classified as theoretically impossible but empirically annoying. Lyra leaned forward, her pointed ears twitching with professional interest. What type of architect presence are we looking at? Massive. The entire planet appears to be built around a single architect facility. We're calling it the Nexus, a structure that exists in normal space-time but extends into dimensions we don't have names for yet. Cross's image stabilized briefly, allowing Jake to see her expression of professional frustration. The temporal loops have made conventional reconnaissance impossible. Every probe we send experiences the same 3-day period repeatedly. And there are people trapped in this loop, Jake asked. A research team from the Galactic Archaeological Consortium. 43 scientists who were studying the planetary anomalies when the loops began 6 months ago. From their perspective, they've been living the same 72 hours for approximately. Well, time doesn't work normally there, so estimates vary between 3 subjective days and 300 years. Jake tried to process this information while his chair decided to exist primarily in next Tuesday. So we need to extract 43 scientists from a temporally unstable planet while securing an architect facility that operates according to physics that don't exist yet. Correct. The Nexus contains what our xenoarchaeologists believe is the central control system for architect technology. The Nexus Crystal, a device that apparently regulates the fundamental forces of reality within a significant portion of the galaxy. And if it falls into the wrong hands, Cross's image flickered ominously. Then someone will have the ability to rewrite the laws of physics on demand. The Void Collective's logical efficiency would be the least of our problems. The briefing concluded with technical specifications that made Jake's head hurt and tactical parameters that violated several principles of common sense. 20 minutes later, he found himself aboard the transport ship Reasonable Doubt, watching Kepler X1 grow larger in the viewport while trying not to think about the fact that their destination existed in defiance of everything he thought he knew about planetary formation. "It's beautiful," Lyra observed, studying the planet's surface through enhanced sensors. "Look at those weather patterns." Jake looked. The planet's atmosphere was currently experiencing what appeared to be a rainbow tornado, several clouds that were raining upward, and a storm system that was inexplicably spelling out words in an ancient language. "The storm just said, 'Welcome visitors,'" Lyra translated, followed by what I think is a recipe for something called temporal soup. "I'm beginning to understand why the research team got stuck here." Their landing was surprisingly smooth, considering they were descending through weather that included gravitational rain and probability lightning. The planet's surface revealed itself to be a mixture of crystalline formations, impossible architecture, and what appeared to be gardens where the plants grew in mathematical equations instead of soil. "Jake," Lyra said as they disembarked, "I need you to prepare yourself for something unusual. More unusual than a planet that shouldn't exist. The temporal loops affect perception differently depending on your species and psychological makeup. Humans tend to experience them as repetitive days. Zarathi experienced them as layered possibilities. The research team." She paused, checking her scanner. "They've developed what we might call temporal adaptation syndrome." They found the research camp established in the shadow of a structure that Jake's eyes insisted was simultaneously a crystal spire, a metal pyramid, and a garden maze. The scientists who greeted them were cheerful, enthusiastic, and completely insane. "Visitors, how wonderful!" Dr. Elena Vasquez bounced toward them with the manic energy of someone who'd been trapped in the same day for either 3 days or several centuries. "You're just in time for breakfast. Again, we're having temporal eggs and probability bacon." "Dr. Vasquez," Lyra said carefully, "how long have you been here?" "Excellent question. By local time, it's been exactly 72 hours, 14 minutes, and 37 seconds. By subjective time, it's been anywhere from 3 days to 400 years, depending on how you count the recursive loops. By emotional time, it's been approximately forever, but a pleasant forever with really excellent research opportunities." Jake exchanged glances with Lyra. "Are all the researchers in this condition?" "Oh yes, we've all adapted beautifully. Dr. Chen has learned to predict the weather by taste testing his morning coffee. Professor Williams can navigate the facility by singing to the walls, and Dr. Martinez has figured out how to make the vending machines in the Nexus dispensing philosophical insights instead of snacks." They were led through the camp, where Jake observed scientists who treated impossible phenomena as routine inconveniences. Dr. Chen was indeed tasting coffee and announcing that Thursday would be partly cloudy with a chance of temporal displacement. Professor Williams was humming to a crystalline wall that was humming back in harmony. Dr. Martinez was engaged in deep conversation with a vending machine that was apparently dispensing wisdom about the nature of existence. "The fascinating thing," Dr. Vasquez continued as they walked toward the Nexus entrance, "is how the loops have given us infinite time to study the facility. Every discovery we make gets preserved across iterations, but we can also try different approaches without consequences. It's like having an unlimited laboratory with a cosmic undo button." The Nexus entrance was a doorway that existed in several dimensions simultaneously, and was currently decorated with what appeared to be welcome banners written in equations. As they approached, Jake felt a peculiar sensation, as if his thoughts were being gently reorganized by invisible hands. The facility responds to consciousness, Lyra explained. It's trying to understand how we think so it can present itself in ways we can comprehend. And is that safe? Probably. The architects designed their technology to be user-friendly. They just had a very different definition of user-friendly than most species. Inside the Nexus, Jake discovered that the architects had apparently believed that interior decorating should involve geometry that was both beautiful and impossible. Corridors folded back on themselves in pleasant curves. Rooms existed inside other rooms without violating spatial conservation. And the lighting came from sources that were definitely there, but couldn't be directly observed. The central control chamber is through here. Dr. Vasquez led them down a hallway that was lined with displays showing the history of the galaxy from perspectives that included, from the point of view of mathematics, and as experienced by gravity. Fair warning, the Nexus crystal is a bit overwhelming on first viewing. The control chamber was a sphere within a cube within a pyramid, within something that Jake's brain refused to classify as a shape. At its center floated the Nexus crystal, a structure that looked like crystallized starlight and hummed with harmonics that made reality seem slightly more flexible. "It's magnificent," Lyra breathed, approaching the crystal with scientific reverence. "It's also the reason we're stuck in the time loops," Dr. Vasquez added cheerfully. "Apparently, it activated when we first entered the chamber and has been trying to understand our intentions ever since. The loops are its way of giving us infinite opportunities to make our purpose clear." Jake studied the crystal, noting how it seemed to respond to his attention by shifting patterns and colors. "So to end the loops, we need to communicate with it." "More than that," Lyra said, her scanners picking up readings that made no sense according to conventional physics. "We need to prove that we understand the responsibility that comes with controlling this level of technology. And if we can't..." Dr. Vasquez's smile remained cheerful, but her eyes held depths that suggested her adaptation to temporal imprisonment wasn't as complete as she pretended. "Then we get to spend eternity learning how." Jake looked around the control chamber, at technology that could reshape reality, at scientists who'd been trapped for months or centuries, and at the crystal that held the power to rewrite the fundamental forces of the universe. "Lyra," he said quietly, "please tell me you have a plan that doesn't involve us joining the Eternal Research Project." "I have a plan," she said, though her expression suggested it was the kind of plan that would either work perfectly or create problems on a galactic scale. "But it's going to require us to trust each other more completely than we ever have before." "How much more completely?" "The kind of trust where our consciousness temporarily merges with architect technology, and we either transcend the normal limitations of individual existence or cease to exist as separate beings entirely." Jake considered this. Around them, the Nexus crystal pulsed with patterns that suggested it was listening to their conversation and finding their uncertainty amusing. "Well," he said finally, "I've had worse Tuesdays." The interdimensional realm of the architects turned out to be exactly as welcoming as Jake had expected from beings who considered mathematics a form of interior decorating. He found himself standing in a space where geometry had apparently gotten into an argument with physics and decided to settle their differences through interpretive dance. "Jake, can you hear me?" Lyra's voice came from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, which was either a side effect of their consciousness being temporarily merged with cosmic technology, or a sign that his brain had finally given up on processing reality normally. "I can hear you, but I can't see you. Also, I think I'm currently existing as a mathematical equation." "That's normal. The architects experience reality as pure information. Our physical forms are just suggestions at this level of existence." Jake tried to move, and discovered that his thoughts had become visible as streams of light that flowed through what might have been space, if space had been designed by someone who found 3 dimensions insufficiently creative. Around them, he could sense the presence of the architects, beings whose consciousness felt like vast libraries filled with books written in languages of pure concept. "Welcome, probability dancers," came a voice that wasn't a voice, communicating in harmonics that bypassed his ears and spoke directly to his understanding. "You have entered the realm where thought becomes form, and intention becomes reality." "Thank you for having us," Jake replied, hoping that interdimensional politeness worked the same way as the regular kind. "Though I should mention that we're here on business. All existence is business. The business of becoming, of growing, of choosing whether to embrace chaos or impose order." Another presence materialized, or perhaps Jake's consciousness had adapted enough to perceive what had always been there. "You are the partnered ones, the merger of logic and improvisation." Lyra's presence moved closer to his in the conceptual space, and Jake felt their thoughts begin to interweave in ways that were both intimate and terrifying. "We've come to understand why you're influencing galactic civilization through your artifacts. Influence is inevitable. Creation leaves echoes. When we transcended physical existence, our technology remained behind, tools waiting for consciousness capable of wielding them responsibly." The architect's communication carried undertones of vast patience and cosmic loneliness. But responsibility cannot be programmed. It must be learned through experience. Jake began to understand. The temporal loops, the tests, the way your artifacts respond to different types of consciousness. You're not trying to control galactic civilization. You're trying to teach it. Teaching and learning are the same process observed from different perspectives. A third architect presence joined the conversation, this one feeling like concentrated curiosity. "Your species possess qualities we never developed. The ability to find solutions through creative chaos, to build harmony from discord, to trust in uncertainty. But other species want to use your technology for control," Lyra pointed out. "The Void Collective, various corporate interests, military factions, they see your artifacts as weapons or tools for imposing order. Order without growth becomes stagnation. Chaos without wisdom becomes destruction. The balance between these forces creates the conditions where consciousness can evolve." The first architect's presence shifted, and Jake felt concepts being transmitted directly to his understanding. "This is why we preserved our technology, not as monuments to our achievements, but as teachers for those who would come after." Jake felt a moment of vertigo as the full scope of the architect's plan became clear. "You're not trying to return to physical existence. You're trying to ensure that the species who inherit the galaxy are ready for the responsibilities that come with cosmic-level technology. Inheritance implies death. We prefer to think of it as graduation." There was something that might have been amusement in the architect's communication. "Your partnership represents the kind of consciousness integration we hoped would eventually evolve." Logic guided by intuition, Jake felt himself beginning to return to normal space-time. But the experience had changed something fundamental in his understanding of himself and his partnership with Lyra. Their consciousness had been briefly merged with cosmic forces beyond individual comprehension, and the echo of that connection would remain with them. "Will we see you again?" he asked as the interdimensional realm began to fade around them. "You carry part of us with you now as we carry part of you. In that sense, we never truly separate." The architect's final communication felt like a benediction. "Go well, teachers. Help your galaxy learn to grow." Jake opened his eyes to find himself back in the Nexus control chamber, standing beside Lyra while Dr. Vasquez and the other researchers watched with expressions of hopeful curiosity. The Nexus crystal had stopped pulsing and now emitted a steady, gentle light that somehow felt like contentment. "The time loops have ended," Lyra announced, checking her instruments. "The temporal distortions are stabilizing." "Does that mean we can leave?" Dr. Chen asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to. "It means you can choose to leave," Jake said, "but the planet is going to remain a research station. The Nexus is too important to abandon, and someone needs to help other species understand what they're dealing with when they encounter architect technology. Dr. Vasquez looked around the chamber with new understanding. So we can continue our work here, but now we'll also be preparing other researchers for similar encounters elsewhere. Exactly. You've become the galaxy's first official architect technology orientation program. Over the following hours, Jake and Lyra worked with the research team to establish protocols for studying the Nexus safely, while preparing educational materials for other species, who would eventually encounter similar artifacts. The work felt like the natural continuation of their partnership, combining Jake's practical approach to problem-solving with Lyra's theoretical knowledge and the researchers' accumulated expertise. So, Jake said as they prepared to return to their ship, 1 down, 46 to go. Not exactly. Lyra was reviewing the data they'd gathered, her expression thoughtful. The architect's teaching system is more sophisticated than we realized. Each artifact we help people understand properly makes the next encounter easier. We're not just securing individual sites, we're helping galactic civilization develop the wisdom to handle this level of responsibility. Jake looked back at the Nexus, where Dr. Vasquez was already planning curriculum for what she decided to call practical cosmic responsibility studies. Around them, the impossible planet continued its gentle defiance of normal physics, but now it felt like a place of learning rather than a trap. You know what the strangest part is, he said. What? A year ago, I was planning to retire to a quiet fishing village. Now I'm apparently a cosmic consciousness integration specialist with a sideline in interdimensional archaeology. Lyra smiled, her silver eyes reflecting the alien light of Kepler X1's twin suns. How do you feel about the career change? Jake considered this as they walked back to their ship, passing gardens where mathematics grew in neat rows, and the weather continued to provide helpful information in ancient languages. His military training had prepared him for many things, but cosmic responsibility education hadn't been covered in any manual he'd studied. Ask me again after we've visited a few more impossible planets and had a few more conversations with beings made of pure information, he said finally. Fair enough, but for what it's worth, I think we make a good teaching team. Even when our consciousness temporarily merges with cosmic forces, beyond individual comprehension. Especially then. Jake laughed, realizing that somewhere between defending a research station with weaponized household appliances and negotiating with interdimensional beings about the nature of consciousness, he'd found something better than the peaceful retirement he'd been planning. He'd found a purpose that was exactly the right size for someone who approached the universe with practical optimism and a willingness to learn. Lyra. Yes. Next time someone tells me my real work is just beginning, I'm going to be much more prepared for what that actually means. Good, because according to the Preservation Council's latest intelligence reports, artifact sites 7 through 12 are all showing signs of increased activity. Jake sighed, but it was the sigh of someone who'd found exactly the right kind of impossible job. I suppose my fishing retirement can wait a few more years. Or decades. Cosmic consciousness evolution tends to operate on geological timescales. Even better, I was getting bored with the idea of predictable days anyway.